Hello, hello, my beautiful people. This is Talia Grey and Elena Serra, who is the certified clinical trauma specialist, and we are going to discuss the book. I'm the author of this book, Goodby Virginity. This is my project, and I'm so proud and so thankful, Elena, that you agreed to join this project. So, hi, Elena.
Hi, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So today we decided to read chapter by chapter, passage by passage, the book, and I'm going to ask you some questions because I know many readers who will read this book, they don't have any idea what is the conclusion of the stories, because if you read the book, the stories are really sensitive, and they are not just those stories you can easily forget or you just read for entertainment. You have to think about it, and you will try not to get in the situations like the heroines of this book get into. So let's start with the beginning, with Rebecca, the chapter 1. Rebecca. So I will read the little passage, or the new word for me, excerpt. Excerpt.
Yes.
So this is not actually a funny story. So let's get serious. Okay, Rebecca began her story. One time I was spending a night at my uncle's house when he molested me. I was only 10 years old. He put his hand down my pants and felt my genitals. He then proceeded to hold me and put his fingers inside me. He was trying to tell me that he would give me a massage, that it would feel good. I was old enough to know what was going on, and I knew what sex was. But I didn't understand it at that time. I just let it happen and didn't scream or cry for help. The worst part of it was that when I told my mom and uncle's wife about what had happened, they didn't believe me. My mom demanded I not tell my father about this event because he would kill my uncle and my father could end up in prison. I was forced to keep this traumatizing memory to myself. Despite the fact that it only happened once and was a very long time ago, I now have different feelings about men being intimate with me. I've always been struggling with it ever since I was young. Now, when I'm sitting on the sofa with a boyfriend watching a movie and he attempts to reach over and touch me, it provokes fear in me and makes me very uncomfortable. Situations like these bring me back to that moment as a child. I was inappropriately touched by a man when I was very young, and it scared me forever. The touch of a man's hand is now repulsive to me. My uncle died at the early age, and that's when I realized karma was real. Evil people always get that what they deserve. So I have a
Mhm.
question. Do you really think that mom and aunt of this girl, Rebecca, really didn't believe her, or they just wanted to cover it up?
So that's a very difficult question, but unfortunately, we see that so much with survivors of abuse is that when they do manage to get the courage that's required in order to tell somebody and risk being disbelieved, they are met with some sort of invalidation, whether it's being told that they don't believe that it's happened, or whether they're told, don't tell anybody or horrible things will happen. And in a way, it is being complicit with the abuser. And that may not be the intention because there is a lot of fear and shame that comes with this experience, for the victim primarily, but for the people who they tell, a lot of people don't want to believe it. And if they do, they don't want it to become a reality. So by reporting it, by taking it to the police, by giving the person counseling, that makes it real. And it brings about into reality something that's still very taboo in society. For hundreds of years, they didn't believe that rape existed. They didn't believe that childhood molestation existed. It wasn't until the last century that these stories started coming to light. So, very loaded question, Natalia. But
That's
either
scary.
way, I know. I know. And it makes it so much harder for victims to come forward.
Do you have any recommendations for girls, maybe our audience, maybe they get into this situation, what to do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, in my specialty, I work with many survivors of abuse of various kinds. And something they all have in common is that they never had that trusted person to go to when the event happened. And so, if your attempts to reach out and to get help are not feasible, if you're being met with disbelief or disregard, I would really recommend keep looking for that right person, keep looking for that support. So even if it means talking to somebody professionally, if it means calling a crisis line, there are some fantastic crisis lines out there, which you will be met with a non-judging listening ear. It's really important that the story gets shared and validated.
Can the girl 10 years old call these lines?
Yes, anybody of any age can call these lines.
Do you think you answered the question? Maybe you have some more to say
I think I answered the
about,
question.
yeah, yeah, about the, do you think they really don't believe her, or they just pretended that nothing happened?
Well, I mean, it's impossible to say, but I think that at the point of the story is they said, don't tell anybody because it's going to have
Yeah,
consequences. So
yeah.
whether they believed her or not, they made it very clear that she needs to keep it to herself. And that's pretty much the same as not believing her, in effect, because it takes the situation and it minimizes it
Mm-hmm.
and it makes it something shameful and private.
Mm-hmm.
So the effect is the same whether they believed her or not.
Okay, let's pretend that they believed her, and her father talked to uncle and punished him somehow. Would you think it would impact her future and her intimate relationship with men, with boyfriends?
Well, one thing that it could do is give her a sense of closure, maybe, but at the same time, it could also have unintended consequences as well. Um, Family drama, if the father was to get into trouble for punishing the uncle. Um, but at the same time, what's really important is that it does, you can take a plate and you can throw it on the floor and the plate shatters and you can say, I'm sorry to the plate, or you can punish the person who threw the plate, but the plate stays broken. So at the end of the day, there's still reparative efforts that need to be made in order to fix the plate, in order to put it back together. And that can really only be done through time, through reflection, through healing, and sometimes through therapy.
Okay, thank you so much. So let's take another passage or excerpt. um, I lost my virginity at 14 years old. This is the same heroine, Rebecca, continues her story. On my living room floor, when my mom let me have a sleepover with a boy. It was quite painful, most likely because I was nervous, scared, and uncomfortable. I sometimes joke that no one had popped my cherry because when I was first penetrated, I didn't bleed. I never felt good about sex with that boy. It was never something I enjoyed. On this contrary, every time I had sex with him, it would hurt. So I have a question for this chapter. If she would receive a proper support from her family... Подожди, это не то. Okay. Yeah. So if she would receive a proper support from her family, would it help her in her future relationship? I think I already put this question for the previous passage. And for this one, I have a question. What do you think? Why she continued having sex with this guy if she never had satisfaction or even pleasure, simple pleasure?
Well, that's a really great question, Natalia, and because it has so many different layers to it. And one is something that's actually mentioned in the book, but it's the pressure from society and the messaging that we get from media and from peers. There is a certain clout that comes with losing your virginity, and there is a certain layer of expectations that comes with it. There also seems to be a confusion between sex and love and sex and validation. And I think maybe most prominently for survivors of abuse, many survivors move on to become what is would be considered promiscuous behavior. I don't like that word. I don't believe in that word. That is the clinical word that has unfortunately been used, and I'm waiting to find a better one. They become more sexually free or maybe sexually undiscerning. And it is because at a young age, you start to believe that, oh, this is what I'm good for. This is what people want from me. This is the thing that they want the most from me. This is what is expected of me. And because they've been silenced before and expected to comply and to give away their sexuality without having to think about it, they kind of carry that onwards into their future, where it's kind of like, okay, this is what people want from me. This is what I'm good for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is it. This makes sense. Let's go further. We have more questions. Despite everything, I was still convinced that I should be doing it. And because sex was just something I pressured myself into, I never really enjoyed it. It's unbelievable how your mind struggles to evaluate the situation. I wish I could say to myself, you don't know what you want. It's just your hormones. You are too young. Instead, what I told to myself was, this is what I need to do when I like a boy, even if I'm only 14.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts like this emerge because of ideas that have been projected in my life. Whether you saw it in a movie or told such things at school. Although you realized that this was not a good experience, you keep doing it again and again and again. We live in a world where evil and pain, stress and anxiety is projected onto us every day in every form, including media, peers, and people you look up to. But the truth is, you have to make these decisions on your own. You create your own life.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like these
Wow.
thoughts of Rebecca. And um, what do you think about modern world, about the impression of movies and songs or examples of different girls? Um, so does it helps or it doesn't? What do you think?
So I think that I like to be optimistic and think that things like social media can be a positive influence. They can be a positive source of information, but at the same time, they are a double-edged sword.
For
And
example, this podcast.
exactly, exactly. We have some positive sources of information out here. We
Yeah,
have healthy forums where
absolutely.
people can discuss very candidly and anonymously their concerns and their questions. And TikTok, now that it's banned, but I think it used to be a source of information as well, positive information as well as negative information. But when we look at society as a whole, there seems to be this message in the media that women need to lose their virginity by a certain age, under certain circumstances. And we are definitely cast into a passive role in these situations. We also have male and female artists glamorizing sexuality in music. A lot of the hottest rap songs today will, to an adult woman, it could be considered empowering and reclaiming your sexuality. But if a 14-year-old was to listen to this music, the message is very different and it could cause them to want to move too quickly in order to, in Rebecca's words, aspire to be like the people she wants to be like. So some of the biggest stars in our society are promoting this hypersexualization. And whereas an adult can discern it and make their own conclusions about the music, I think if a 14-year-old was to hear it, the message seems to be very black and white. And part of that is because we develop the prefrontal cortex of our brain, which is right here, up until the age of 25. So up until the age of 25, we're still learning about consequences. We're still learning about responsibility and accountability. And we're still learning how to think in terms of responsibility and accountability. So anything prior to the age of 14 can be taken as quite literal.
Interesting. So then I think this is a good idea to explain the book because a lot of my readers, I think, will be teenagers or girls around 14, 15 years old. So let's hope, let's pray that this podcast will help them. And let's go further. We have another passage. So, my first relationship lasted for 2 years, and I affected many relationship I had later. It affected many relationship I had later. After the breakup, every boyfriend I had would stick around for 2 years, and I was sexually active with all of them. Sex still never felt right. It was only a release, a rush of hormones, but never something special or intimate. I couldn't possibly describe it as making love. It was just intercourse. So the question is, it isn't interesting how she developed a 2 years pattern in her relationship, because this is not just one sentence, she mentioned it before. And why 2 years? Is there an explanation from your point of view?
I think 2 years is actually pretty optimistic because without the proper support, the proper guidance, without being able to share their story, without being able to have their voice heard and to process the traumatic memories, a lot of people end up in a pattern for years where sexuality is just never fully reclaimed. It's never fully feeling right. And it's always interlaced with some sort of dread or something. And for some victims, it's a lot more traumatic. They will have flashbacks. They will have aversion to touch. But in more subtle cases, not to say that they're subtle at all, but in more subtle presentations, sex will never feel complete.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think in this story, it's very hopeful that she met the right person, right? Maybe I'm going too far ahead with this.
Yes, yes, maybe in the next episode we will come to the end of this story, and now we just can give a little just ideas about
Yeah,
the end. It's gonna be very interesting.
I think so.
Yeah, yeah, I got it. So 2 years, it's not bad, right?
Unfortunately, trauma takes a while to resolve, and it can vary from individual to individual, which is why it's so important to get a supported, trusted person to help you. And if they can't, to get therapy.
Mm-hmm. I got it. Thank you. Let's go to another passage. So another 2 years passed. Another boyfriend had just left my life, and that was when I met Tommy. This man was the father of my first child, my eldest son. I met Tommy in a bar. He and I were a typical pair of college students. We messed around, had fun, had sex, and eventually I got pregnant. After some consideration, I decided to keep the baby, but Tommy wasn't satisfied with the outcome at hand and decided that he didn't wish to stay with me. It was evident that he wasn't ready for a child, let alone a family. We parted ways and I spent the next 10 years of my life as a single mother. Question. This is actually a very common situation many young girls find themselves in. What do you recommend they do to minimize the impact of stress and anxiety it causes?
So we do see this situation all the time. And I have to say, motherhood is the most radically transformational thing that I think can happen to a person. And to do it on your own takes quite a bit of courage. Even to do it with other people takes a lot of courage, but to do it on your own takes a certain level of determination. So I have the utmost respect for all these young women and women of all ages who end up in this situation. So what I would recommend is getting a really strong support system is probably the number one most important thing. Not just for practical matters, but for emotional matters as well, because motherhood, as much as it is a gift, it comes with so many challenges. It comes with so many frustrations. And it's so important to have that grounding, stabilizing force around you that normalizes the experience and that validates what you're going through.
And it's important to stay like healthy mentally and physically. How to keep this health if you are having all this anxiety and fears?
Of course, it's very challenging. Self-care is usually the number one thing that we therapists recommend. So it's remembering that although your whole life is now about this little person, you also have to remember that you exist as a person as well, and that you cannot pour from an empty cup. So finding these moments in order to take care of yourself, to take care of yourself mentally and physically, to eat, to sleep as much as you can, becomes very, very monumental in the long run for maintaining your sanity and your mental health.
And I know you answering this question not for not as the specialist. You have your daughter, and luckily you have your husband and a happy family. Your mom of 3 years old, beautiful cutie, Sophia.
Yes.
So yeah, you understand how tough is it to raise the small baby, and
Yes,
how much
absolutely.
effort it takes. So, Lena, thank you so much for this time. I know you're very, very busy. I hope it will be very helpful for our audience. And please subscribe to Lena's social media, and to this YouTube channel to stay in touch. And we will continue recording the episodes like this. I hope it will be very profitable for all of us. And please like if you liked this information. Join us in the next episode.
Okay, thank you so much, Talia. It was a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for your beautiful book on such an important topic.
Thank you. Thank you. Go to your
Okay,
baby. Go to Sophie.
okay.
Bye.
All right, bye.
Bye.